Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So it's been a long time coming, but I'm finally wrapping up my series of Dracula reviews with Dracula episode 3, The Dark Compass. And boy, let me tell you, there's a lot to say about episode 3. It opens with a semi-flashback from the ending of the first episode. We discover after Dracula disguised himself in Jonathan's skin that he actually freed Mina and infected Sister Agatha instead. The episode then picks up from the ending from episode 2, and this episode definitely feels like Stephen Moffat's episode, whereas the first two I feel were more like Mark Gatiss episodes. At the end of episode 2, we see that Dracula finally arrived at the shore of Whitby, and then at the beginning of episode 3, after the flashback from episode 1, we see that Dracula is still in Whitby, but in the year 2020? It is then later explained that at the end of episode 2, when the Demeter exploded, Dracula quickly went overboard and went into one of his many boxes that was also cast overboard by the crew of the Demeter. And the reason why he survived for so long is that he was kept preserved in his native soil. And so, Dracula arrives in England 123 years later from 1897. When Dracula arrives at the shore of Whitby, he is greeted by a team of special forces, and their team leader, Zoe Van Helsing, an ancestor of Agatha Van Helsing. At this point, I could definitely see the viewers losing interest in the show. However, I wasn't one of them. It took me time to adjust and get used to the modern setting because I always thought of Dracula in an olden Victorian days type setting, but the time jump from 1897 to present day really didn't affect me because I believe that at some point Bram Stoker actually intended Count Dracula to travel to modern day England. Other characters are introduced into episode 3. We have Dr. Seward, Lucy, Quincy, and Renfield, surprisingly played by Mark Gatiss. One thing I do like about episode 3 is that Lucy Westenra actually does don the name Bloofer Lady. But because this episode is set in the year of 2020, characters in the traditional Dracula story have been slightly changed. Seward and Quincy, for example, are now portrayed by younger actors. So other than the biggest change being the time jump, the decision to change the characters' ages is now another change to the Dracula story. One plot point that I must mention even before I attempt to talk about Dracula's death is that Dracula is taken to the Jonathan Harker Foundation. The foundation was set up in Harker's name by Mina Murray with the primary intention of medical research. It is so that if Dracula was ever caught, he would be confined and studied. When Zoe Van Helsing enters the Foundation, she initially asks Dracula for a blood test. As that scene continues, Dracula reveals that blood is lives and all the answers she seeks are in the blood, if only she knew how to read it. With this, Dracula realizes that Zoe has cancer, and that is the reason her blood was poisonous to him. This now makes sense because earlier on in the episode, Dracula actually bites Zoe. The scene that follows is a vision of Dracula and Zoe Van Helsing. Dracula then begins to regurgitate Zoe's blood. Then we jump out of the vision and Dracula faints in a pool of Zoe's blood. Episode 3, much like the first two, is filled with other film references. Off the top of my head, there are references to The Shining, Nosferatu, and the big nod is from Dracula 1958 from Hammer Studios. Now, I suppose that I have mentioned that reference, I do have to talk about the ending, so if you haven't seen it, this section of the video is going to contain spoilers, so warning ahead. Shortly after Dr. Seward kills Lucy, he leaves Dracula's apartment. Then for a split second, Zoe leaps onto Dracula's table, runs towards the curtains, and pulls them down. And at this point, it is revealed that the sun is not harmful to Count Dracula. Zoe is almost completely taken over by Agatha Van Helsing, as she reveals that the sunlight, reflections, and invitations are not weaknesses, but they are merely habits that the Count himself has become accustomed to believe are curses. Zoe Van Helsing, or Agatha at this point, reveals that the one thing Dracula fears most is death, to which she is soon to be welcomed to. The two characters share an epiphany in the sunlight, where Dracula realizes that the majority of his life he has lived ashamed, alone, and afraid. In his final moments, Dracula drinks Zoe's blood, knowing it is poisonous for him, causing Dracula's death. And this is the part of the episode where I found Dracula to be a tragic character. We discover why Dracula fears the cross and why he fears the classic tropes. and I did enjoy Gatiss and Moffat's take on that. Once again, Klaus Bang never fails. He's definitely a worthy Count Dracula. Before I wrap up this video, I do want to mention the score by David Arnold is absolutely amazing. I even have the soundtrack on my phone. My favourite piece is called The Fear, which plays at the end of episode 3. So in conclusion, I do sort of think that The Dark Compass is a fitting end to the Dracula series, and I know that some people are going to disagree with me on this because episode 3 did get some negative feedback by the viewers. But this is how I see it. The Dracula story on film and TV has been told so many times, it's a timeless tale. And the majority of those films and TV series stick relatively close to the novel. We have Universal's 1931 version, Hammer's 1958 version, the Louis Jourdan 1977 TV version, the 1979 movie starring Frank Langella, and of course, Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola. But it's funny how every single one of those movies and beyond has never depicted a page-by-page adaptation. I mean, let's face it, that would be a very long movie and it would have to be split into parts. But who wants to see another version of the Dracula tale unless it's a page-by-page adaptation? I certainly don't. I have the other movies to go by. This is why I don't mind the 2020 Dracula episodes. It took a completely different approach with the end of episode 2. Like I said previously, it took some time for myself to get my head around episode 3, and by the end, I actually enjoyed the series that Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat created. I mean, let's be honest, at least it wasn't Dracula 2000 or Van Helsing. So guys, with that being said, that finally wraps up my Dracula series of reviews. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it, and it lets me know that you enjoyed this series of reviews. Click that notification bell down below so you get notified when I upload future content. And if you'd like, leave some comments in the comment section to tell me what you thought of the episodes overall and what you thought of this video. And on that note guys, I will see you in the next video, and as always, take care.